Hey guys, Adam aka CS Radical here. So let's just cut right to the fucking chase, shall we? Fox News did a goddamn piece on the quote-unquote possibilities of video games being linked to real-life violence. You know, I know, and you know that you know. It's bullshit. And I don't even think I have to explain myself. Let's just put on the fucking video so I can rip this one a new asshole.
President Trump hosted a meeting with video game makers and their critics at the White House today. He was busy. They're looking for ways to reduce youth violence following the Florida school shooting.
Well, again, we always want to solve violence when it comes to school shootings. No one is against this, but before they even get into the idea that video games might be the reason for it, can I just say that, can we just please, for the love of God, stop doing the same two fucking things over and over again? The right focuses on outside stuff like video games, music, all that shit. And the left immediately just focuses on guns. Can we, for fuck's sakes, stop focusing on those two things? For once, can we just look at mental health and other mitigating factors like lack of father figures or lack of mother figures, abuse in the household, bullying, poverty, all this kind of stuff that actually are legitimate factors in somebody having a violent streak. But instead, it's guns, where, in all honesty, gun control is actually really harsh in the States. Most people aren't willing to research into that. And then on the other side, this side, how the fuck does a video game have anything to do with violence? But let's see what these morons come up with, all right?
And the president recently expressed shock at what young people are exposed to today.
The video games, the movies, the internet stuff.
Can I just note that the way these, the video games, the movies, the internet stuff, he really does sound like somebody who is in such a bubble that he literally has no idea what any of this is. I'm starting to wonder if Donald Trump has ever played a video game in his entire life or has even been aware of them beyond the fact that he probably just saw that they were making money at one point. So he's like, I wish I could make some more money. But I mean, realistically, how fucking... he really does sound like a geriatric 90-year-old man who fucking, has literally lived in the 1940s his entire life. It's insulting to me.
Is so violent. It's so incredible. I see it. I get to see things that you'd be amazed at. I have a very young son who I look at some of the things he's watching and I say, how is that possible?
Well, let's take a look at what is possible in real life. CNN, for example, whenever there's a school shooting, decides to shoot the fuck out of it in terms of all this fucking footage. They need to get crying kids everywhere. And you're telling me that violence in video games is where it's really bad. Violence in film is where it's really bad. Are you telling me that fictional violence is the much more harsher reality than the picture that news companies like Fox fucking News, CNN, NBC, all of these fucking people, are you telling me that that isn't as bad as the picture that a piece of fictional material creates? Are you fucking kidding me?
And this is what kids are watching.
Now let's discuss whether there is any link between violence on the screen and real violence.
No.
With Ben Shapiro, editor-in-chief of the Daily Wire, and retired Army Lieutenant Colonel David Grossman, who's authored books on the psychology of violence, Army Ranger, Black Belt, and everything. Okay, you win just on that score.
No one cares.
It's great to have you both on. Let's start with you, David, because some of these games are really wild. I mean, they're pretty graphic, pretty gory. You know them, Call of Duty. I don't do any of it.
And that's why you shouldn't be allowed to go on a show that is nationally televised and talk about how you know what's going on. You don't get to say that you know that these things must cause real violence when you have never even played a game before. Do you guys remember the Fox thing that they did with Mass Effect when they had the headline of Sex Box? And they had Jeff Keighley on there, who, by the way, I actually don't like. But Jeff Keighley for one night was a fucking god to me because he just hammered them. And when he asked these two women, had they ever played the game before? And you hear the one lady go, no. And we're like, well, no fucking shit. You don't know what's going on. No, if you had played the game, you would have known that, hey, these sex scenes are not interactive, and there's something you have to work your ass off towards, and there is an emotional attachment said in this. It's not like you just walk into a room and you point a gun at the fucking girl and say, fuck me. It's literally just I don't get it. Why do you have to act like you are the authority on anything that you have no information on, that you have no experience with? I don't sit here and talk about what we should do with the military because I've never been in the fucking military. I don't sit here and tell you how to run your news station when it comes to an actual business. I tell you what you should be and should be not saying because I fucking talk too. But I don't tell you how to run your business when I have not run my own business. So get out of our fucking shit. Stay out of our community and we'll happily stay out of yours. But you can't do that because you can't just admit that there is a lot more to violencing children than just fucking video games. You can't admit that bad parenting, that terrible childhoods, and a lack of fucking desire to do anything about it other than yell about it means nothing. So that's your own goddamn fault.
But like Grand Theft Auto.
Yeah, they're simulated violence.
It's a criminal simulator, a murder simulator.
Yeah.
Murder simulator. Oh my god, we're back to this word. Where the fuck is Jack Thompson? Is he hiding there? Is this like an episode of Punk with Jack Thompson? He's just gonna come out and just kind of smile in the corner? What the fuck, man?
Evan Ramsey, others like, some of these other killers, Dylan Klebold, Eric Harris of Columbine, were steeped in these games, Adam Lanza.
The Norway killer trained on those. He said he trained on them. 69 dead on an island in Norway, and he spent a year training on video games.
Okay. The whole idea of being trained on video games. Let me put the most obvious evidence of this. I am 30 years old. I have been playing video games since I was 6. I have been playing Call of Duty since it came out. I have been playing shooters since GoldenEye. First-person shooters since GoldenEye. I have never once had any inklings to fire a gun, to use a weapon, and to commit any acts of violence. I have been in one fight in my entire life, and it was not voluntary on my part. I was pushed into it. And guess what? I lost because I didn't know how to fight. Me playing video games for 24 years now has done nothing to put any ounce of aggression in my body. I understand the difference between fantasy and reality. These fucking people, or at least in the case... Actually, you know what? I'll even say, because Ben Shapiro, later in this video, will talk. He still takes the stance that he thinks these things are immoral, and I'll get to that. So realistically, all three of them just don't know what they're talking about.
To prepare himself for his crime. The killer in Florida, he spent 15 hours a day on violent video games. The most all-consuming, all-pervasive thing in this guy's life are these violent video games. And less than a year ago, the American Psychological Association made a definitive statement. There is a clear, unequivocal link between violent video games, violent behavior.
Okay, again, I'm not denying that this may be a possible thing, but how many times have we had these same subjects researched by various people and various research companies, various associations, and presidents have done research on this, both Democrat and Republican. And every time that we've had those major ones come out, there has been zero link. So what I'm hearing is that the odd time that we get a actual link between video games and real life violence is so far and few between that we have to believe that it's biased research, because so many others have been done, and done specifically by the order of the President of the United fucking States. And on both Democrat and Republican researches, we've come with the same conclusion, that there is no correlation between video games and real life violence. Aggression is there when it comes to troubled teenage kids, but the video games are not what's causing it, and they might not even be what even gives any sort of a spark to it. Literally, there's so much else that we can go into that actually could cause violence. Video games are the furthest thing from that.
Their blood pressure goes up, their heart rate goes up, violent actions go up. The data is persistent and clear across many different forms. You cannot deny it. It is overwhelming.
Ben Shapiro, I know you're skeptical about a link from video games. Yes. Millions and millions of people play these video games. I mean, girls aren't as into these video games, I'm sorry, as boys are, but...
Okay, let's dive into this one. All right. So... Immediately, this is how you know that this fucking cunt does not have a clue what she's talking about. Because we have obviously done the research. Women are it's almost a 50-50 split now. It's almost a perfect 50-50 split between men and women playing video games. For fuck's sakes. Like, this woman, not only being a cunt, like, feminists should be on this cunt too, because she's saying that, you, as girls, you don't play video games and you shouldn't be playing video games because obviously it's a boy thing. Fucking get after this bitch.
But I think if my sons had access to them, I'm sure they'd play them all the time, because something about the boy's brain and these games.
Because it's fun.
But why are you not worried about it?
Well, I mean, I'm not supremely worried about it just because the consumption of these violent video games has been going up continuously since the early 90s, and yet youth violence has been going down since the early 90s.
Absolutely fucking true. Youth violence has continually gone down. And actually, one of the major points where it really started to go down was when the PlayStation 2, and specifically Grand Theft Auto 3 came out. The game that people seem to go after the most seemed to be about the turning point for the violent crime rate, especially in youths, going down exponentially. And I could argue, is there actually a lot of troubled kids that were going to commit violence when these games were coming out? Sure, but you know what happened? Those games gave them an outlet. Those games gave them a way to enact these fantasies of theirs or these desires of theirs and not having to go out in real life and do it. To not have to risk the danger of other people and to risk their own danger, because obviously you commit any act of violence to that level, you be shot and killed. And I don't think everybody that commits violence, because we see in a lot of these school shootings, the person takes their own life. I think it's just a matter of, I think they know at that point their life's over, so they're like, fuck it. But I mean, if you're someone who just wants to, take out somebody or whatever, like, you're not wanting, the negative connotations of things. You don't want to get shot and killed. You don't want to get put in jail for the rest of your life. So, I mean, it's like, at least if you have the desire to want to commit violence, what these games can possibly do is actually relax you, because it allows you to do these things without worry of getting hurt yourself or being put in prison.
So the correlation actually doesn't fit. As far as individual instances, I mean, you can find patterns in very sporadic instances among virtually all data sets. But there's some pretty mixed data about this. It's true that the American Psychological Association recommends that parents not allow their kids to play these games. I wouldn't let my kids play these games because I think they're immoral, frankly.
I mean, look, I do listen to Ben a lot. And I knew when I watched this video that this is going to be a real test, because I agree with a lot of what Ben says, and I know that there are a lot of things that he will say that I will vehemently disagree with, and this is definitely one of them. I mean, look, like, when you are a Republican and you are part of the gun debate, you are part of the war machine, I'm sorry, but when you using the word immoral to describe fiction is where I really have to draw the line, Ben, and I'm sorry, but, you're completely wrong on this front, because you can't sit here and act like fiction can possibly have any value to anything. Like, there's nothing immoral about what's going on. And in fact, when you talk about games like Call of Duty World War II is a representation of the real life violence that happens. So if you're going to tell me that that's immoral, then no shit. But we also fought that war so we could have the freedoms that we have. So you might want to take it as it comes. Now, if we're talking a game like fucking Manhunt, that's a different story, because that's one of those weird gray areas that I really do agree that might have gone a little too far. But in terms of games just being immoral, like, thankfully this is the violent conversation, because if this was sex in video games, I'd be hitting the floor even fucking harder right now.
But that should really be up to parents. I'm not sure the government should be in the business of stepping in. In 2011, Justice Scalia, in a majority decision 5-4, found that it was actually unconstitutional for the state of California to regulate the capacity of parents to be able to get these video games for their kids, or even for kids to get them themselves without parental permission. He saw that as a content violation under the First Amendment.
I mean, there's a lot to go through there. I mean, obviously, he's right that a lot of this really should come down to parenting. The government shouldn't have any part in trying to force people to not be having access to these things. And I mean, we've had this before. We have the ESRB. The ESRB was enforced by the government. We had to do this because the government mandated it. So, at that point, you got what you wanted. You have a rating system. And I've seen so many cases where it's obviously the parenting because they're not paying the fuck attention. Here's a great example. I remember that a woman came into an EB Games once and was yelling at my friend who worked behind the counter, because I was going there just to visit. and she had bought her kid, who I assume was probably like 9 or 10. She had bought him a copy of The Sims 3. And she was freaking out. I was like, there's sex and nudity in this thing and blah, blah. I'm like, besides the point of sex in The Sims is literally bumps in the cushions, like, or bumps under the covers. Like, come on. And then the nudity, it's all fucking, censored. So unless this kid was putting mods in there, that's a whole different ballgame. But she was like yelling, and my friend behind the counter, who is a woman, by the way, because again, there's that idea that women don't play video games, right? She said, well, if you look at the box here, there's the symbol underneath where it says it's for kids that are teenage and older. And she screamed back, it's like, I don't care. You guys should have to do this for me. And I was this close to like fucking smacking this bitch. And finally, they were trying to find another game, and he ended up picking up Smash Brothers. And she's like, oh, well, this has violence in it too, now that she's reading the label. And I said, look, this is subjective. I don't even remember what the rating for Smash was. I can't remember if it was T for teen, if it was E10+. And I said, look, what you... And I finally jumped in. I said, look, ma'am, like, whatever you see in this game is not actually violent. It's literally the same kind of stuff you would see in your average kids' cartoons. Your average Looney Tunes, your Tom and Jerry's, all of those. That's all you would see. It's just fake violence of, like, people fake hitting each other. It's not anything serious. There's no blood. There's no gore. There's no limbs being cut off. It's just fun violence. So, I mean, it's so frustrating because, again, we can't just admit that parents are fucking up, that we're misdiagnosing kids and drugging them to hell to make them even crazier. The fact that the government is spending more time trying to scapegoat things than actually fucking take care of the problem. That's not the fault of video games. It's not the fault of Sony, Microsoft, Nintendo, Square Enix, Activision, Blizzard, any of those companies. It's not their fucking fault.
Let's talk more about this. The assassinations that take place in the games.
Who gives a fuck? Assassinations. Again, fake, fictional fucking violence.
My book, Laura, Assassination Generation, we outlined the dissenting opinions in that case. There's much more to this situation that we need to understand. Clarence Thomas and Stephen Breyer, the most liberal, most conservative justice, dissented. Stephen Breyer said they use these to train military.
I'd love to know what they're using to train the military with, because I have a really hard time thinking that they're training military individuals by using video games. Because, no offense, I've held a BB gun pistol before and tried to shoot it after being this vigilant killing machine that I have become over the years because of video games, and I didn't hit the target for fucking shit. And this was from close fucking range too. You cannot learn about recoil and you cannot learn battle experience. You can't learn the idea to pull the trigger when you see something from playing a game. Being able to fight in a game is so much more different than real life. Your life is not in danger when you're playing a video game, so you just shoot anything that moves. When you are in a real-life battle situation, you don't just shoot immediately. You have to assess the individual, because it might be a friendly. It might be an innocent civilian. As they always say when it comes to police training, when it comes to military training, you only point your gun at something you intend to kill. But sure, let's go with the idea that video games do that. Sure, let's go with that. Explain to me what a PS4 controller is going to do to help with your aim on the battlefield. Explain to me what playing Call of Duty Team Deathmatch is going to do when it comes to proper tactical, battle experience and using your gun properly when you're in battle. I guarantee you that a fucking joystick is not going to make that person better.
I'm not a medical expert, but I know who is, and it's not the people the video game industry put out. You need to know more about that case. The data is so overwhelming. And when I was a kid, nobody buckled their seatbelt. We're all just fine. Not everybody their seatbelt unbuckled died, but all the ones that died had their seatbelt.
So are you saying kids who have predispositions to this, maybe they have a trigger inside of them, they steep themselves in this violence?
You add one more ingredient to it. A great book, Inside the Mind of a Teen Killer. the new factor in every single case, the new factor. The fact that violent crime is down is not true.
The fact that violent crime is down is not true. Are you fucking kidding me? Look at every single statistic out there from the FBI, from the government, from police forces around the world. Violent crime almost in every major democratic country is going down. It is constantly going down because there is more access to things that can keep us busy in our daily lives so we don't have the time to go out and take a gun and shoot people on the street. You're a fucking idiot.
Are they using these in Army Ranger training? Do they do video simulation now?
But we do it with law enforcement and military training. We use simulators.
Yeah, but again, simulators could be a lot different. We could be talking virtual reality. Of course, virtual reality. Like, if this literally was all about a specific virtual reality game, I could half understand that because you might actually be fucking holding the gun properly. You know, there is going to come to a point where Call of Duty is going to be a VR game. We're obviously going to... I might not even be alive when that really gets perfected, but that's going to become a thing. And I think that that's when the conversation might actually have some merit. But right now, there's zero merit behind these arguments. Zero.
You don't see it in Ranger School, but you see it as an integral part of our training. To make killing a conditioned response is part of modern training. We've got to do it. Healthy people have to be trained to kill, and the video games do the same thing to the kids.
Yes, because like I said earlier, you know, just because I play Call of Duty for X amount of time, I've now been fully trained to kill, and if I was put into a situation where I had a gun in my hand and they told me to kill that person, I would do it without a fucking second thought. Go fuck yourself.
And Ben, what I always think about this is, you know, science or not.
Science or not, science is the proof. Science is the fucking proof.
For young children to continually see images of heads exploding, chests opening up, you talked about the immorality of all of this.
Well, then I guess we can't watch alien movies anymore. Chests blowing up. Nope, too much. Nope, too much violence. It's not real. Too much violence, though. Kids are going to get, violent over it. Fucking bitch.
Whether it's constitutional or not constitutional, maybe as a society we have to talk about what numbing ourselves to this very graphic violence. It's not like cartoon. This looks like a real person's head exploding. And it's over and over and over again. And you're doing it 10 hours a day, and you're playing with people in other countries. That's where you're getting your stimulation.
You know where else we're getting our stimulation from? The social aspect of doing this. Do you understand that now kids that are bullied, kids that are outcasted at school, now have a way to be able to still have that companionship, that friendship with people around the world because of video games? Do you understand that less and less kids are becoming introverts because they have the ability now to go and talk to people that don't know who they are, that don't know how they look, and can judge them just based on their personality, which is what we should be doing this entire fucking time, but we live in this unbelievably fucking physical society where everything is about how you look, everything is about how you dress. For God's sakes. We're so fucking materialistic that we've forgotten what it's like to just talk with people and enjoy them for the person they are on the inside. So what video games have done, have created a world where you can do that. I do not play games like Destiny, games like Overwatch. I don't play those games because I get to kill things. I play those things because they are social interactions that I can have with people that I have made friends with from various parts of the world over the course of the many years that I have been playing. I don't understand how this is so hard for any of these, especially right-wingers. But obviously the left are capable of doing this too. But the right wing tends to be a lot more on this issue. I don't understand how it's so hard to understand that. What's so difficult? I don't get it. What's so hard to... What don't you understand? It's... I give up.
And boys need to be outside playing. They need to be doing physical stuff. Instead, they're sitting there on these screens all day.
That's up to the fucking parent, not you.
I just don't see how any of that's good.
I fully agree with all of that. I just think there's a question of parental authority, and I think it's a question of how we as a society choose to raise our kids, not necessarily a question of governmental regulation. And the problem I have with the president getting involved is whether this is going to be a cultural issue or is this a regulatory issue? Is this an issue where the president tries to promulgate some sort of legislative response, or where we're supposed to think that the government is going to step in and fix all of this? Because, again, I'm not sure that the statistics match up in terms of just public policy, but I think we're all in agreement that we'd all prefer that kids play less of this, and we have a pretty robust rating system on video games as well. I hope it gets more robust, and I hope more parents take responsibility for the crap their kids are putting in their system.
You know, the Adam Lanza, who had such an empty look in his face, he obviously had severe mental problems as well.
Thank you. That's the one good thing you said, you dumb woman. Fuck's sakes, man. It's not that hard to understand. Obviously, the people that commit these insane and these unbelievable acts of violence, they're not well. The video games are not doing it. There are so many other things that they are predisposed to first. If anything, games are saving people because it's giving them something that they can take comfort in, something that they can feel like they belong to. Of course, there are always going to be games that might touch a little bit of a nerve, but they're not the reason that kids are going out and shooting schools. For God's sakes. Oh, how is that part of your brain working? How are you seriously looking at this and thinking, no, there's nothing that could possibly be taken wrong with that statement? How are you so delusional? How can anyone in real life be this delusional?
Us protecting our kids from guns and tobacco and alcohol and pornography, sex, automobiles, firearms, and all those other areas, they wouldn't buckle their baby in their car seat if it wasn't the law. It's not to get done until we take action. Most major nations on the planet regulate children's access to these games. We're about the only major nation that doesn't do that.
Well, I'm glad I don't like these games, so it's great to have both of you on.
Yeah, that's okay. We're happy that you're not in our community either, because we wouldn't fucking want you. So, I don't know if there's really much else you can say on the subject, honestly. Because, I mean, let's just be honest here, guys. We all know. We understand the difference between fantasy and reality. Anyone who has played video games for any amount of time and has grown up into their teens has been able to understand that correlation. We've been able to understand the difference between shooting people up in a Call of Duty game. We can play Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 and play No Rush and play that fucking sequence where you can kill so many innocent people in an airport, which, by the way, actually, the first time I played it, I never shot my weapon. Because I looked at it, I'm like, no, that's wrong. I did it one time, replaying it literally as a joke, just to be like, this is stupid. That's a scene in video game that I think really does push it, because if anything, you shouldn't have had the option to shoot, because at no point should we ever be having to. What they should have been doing was forcing it, and what I mean by that is you have no control of your character in that point. That would have made that for a real heavy scene. And instead, it just ended up being something that people took way out of context. They didn't have to make that interactive, and they shouldn't have made that interactive, because they were basically asking for attention like that. But when it comes to that difference, I can play that game in that moment specifically and understand that there is a much bigger difference between that and what is a real shooting, a real mass shooting. A real mass shooting is much more horrific than that. And we are fully in understanding that we obviously don't want this kind of stuff to happen. We don't want this violence. Of course we don't. But at some point, we have to look in the mirror and really understand that the issues may not actually be with something on the outside, but it may be something on the inside. Depression, anxiety, a feeling of not belonging to anything, a feeling of nowhere to go, a feeling that your life is useless, pointless, meaningless. Abuse, sexual and violent abuse, watching domestic abuse at home when you're a child. There are so many possibilities out there that could actually be legitimately contributing to what ends up being young women and young men that die at the hands of a school shooter. But at the end of the day, we need to stop scapegoating, and we need to stop making up stories and statistics to push a narrative that just does not exist. So for Fox News to do this again, after they still haven't learned the lesson, the amount of times they've tried to do this before, is just absolutely ridiculous. And you should be critically panned for what you've done. You should be absolutely raked under the coals for this. You won't, because nobody in your company is going to give a shit. And honestly, most people are just laughing at you now. I don't know if the anger is really that much now, so much as we're all just laughing. That's kind of the reaction I had at first, where I'm like, great, we're doing this again. Like I said, where's Jack Thompson? But this is infuriating, guys. I don't think that you truly understand how delusional you are. And I think you need to take a step back, and realize just how fucked up you actually are in the head. Because you believe that fiction is causing real things. It's fiction, guys. It's not that hard to understand.